Hello everyone. We are in the jungles of Costa Rica at one of my favorite places, Sirena Station. It's a pleasant little place. It's also off-season and raining, so until the weather clears up, I'm stuck here with the howler monkeys and my trusty old, well, she's lovely. I call her Moose. Anyway, to pass the time, I collected my thoughts regarding MSFS 2024. I don't want to dwell too much on the bugs though. There are plenty of videos and forum posts about them, and by the time I finish this video, some might even be fixed with Sim Update 1. Let's start with the launch, which was predictably a mess, and in some ways even more trouble than MSFS 2020, which at least had more excuses. So I waited a bit to get into the sim, and even more time to get into the career mode. But it didn't get much better. Overall, it's not even the bugs, although those don't help either. I'm finding I'm getting bored with career mode after only a month and ready to give up. The reason I am focusing on the career mode is because it's simply the best feature to illustrate many of the odd choices the game makes. As for me, I am somewhere between a casual and a hardcore simmer. I'm also too lazy and broke to invest into more serious PC hardware, not to mention the peripherals and the third-party software, and I lack the patience for the study-level planes. I'm just glad I can run this thing on my PC at all without the extra software hogging up my CPU or GPU. I do like some system depth though, and I stick to buying only a handful of airports and airplanes that catch my fancy. I'm also easily distracted by the view, so I mostly keep low and slow, with the occasional forays into airliners and wet sim, even though that place scares me. That being said, let's do a speedrun of the main issues that plague the user experience on a daily basis. Creepy AI small talk, inaccurate stats on the plane selection pages, caravan handling like a boat in the storm, and that's just taxiing. Bush planes with wheels made out of chopsticks. The Sky Courier and the Saab are almost unflyable. The caravan handling like a boat in the storm, but only in career mode. The PC-12 gives you hypoxia. Many G1000s have bugs that shouldn't exist. Caravan handling like a freighter in the Suez Canal. People hanging out from airplanes. Spawning on buildings. Istanbul when? This is a cow. This guy here. Whatever the hell this is. EFB not remembering my settings. Buildings at the end of runways. Buildings at the end of runways. Buildings at the end of runways. But they had time and effort for this? Trees at the end of runways. Still, this building. Oh look, a deer. On the runway. Model matching is worse than in 2020. But I see this static plane which is not even in the default sim. At least I can't see other users in the wrong aircraft if they are farther than 5 miles. I can skip cold and dark start, taxi to runway, cruise, and taxi to parking, but I have to do the unskippable walk around and find a click spot for the pitot cover or the chocks. Explain. The EFB prompt never goes away, messing up my pictures, but the shortcut for entering an aircraft is never mentioned in free flight mode. And then there is the career mode. Empty or buggy stats. Irrelevant info is present everywhere. Brackets leading into terrain. Hold short point skipping around. ATC in general. Helicopter missions to the other side of the world. Who is first class wings? Helicopter missions into sloped forests. Who is Radiant Airways? Mission steps panel randomly not working. Color text placeholders or the lack of them. Helicopter missions into the middle of forests. Stewardesses and trays in GA aircraft. Parking brakes, really? And holy crap, that turbulence. To be fair, many of these bugs will eventually get fixed, even though about a third of them shouldn't even exist. However, I expected the default aircraft and systems to be at the August 2024 level, not at the August 2020 level, and in more than a few cases it feels like a downgrade. I don't mind that I can't blow up the engines by accident or that the circuit breakers are not functioning, but in some planes there's very little to do. Worse, the cloud streaming means no performance mods and liveries, and that means noticeably less user-generated content for MSFS 2024. It seems like the solution for this part at least would be to partially revert back to the previous method and have at least the aircraft download onto the hard drive and stream the scenery and the world updates from the cloud. Still, it will get better and hopefully fast enough. So let's talk about the user experience instead, because that's where I'm really struggling with the design choices the developers made. The surprise announcement of MSFS 2024 was met with some understandable confusion and outrage. Once the dust settled, the developers revealed that it will include more activities for the players, including the Caeer Mode. It looks like there was a lot of effort put into some parts of the game mode, but the charitable interpretation is that the rest was rushed and thrown together in the last minute, and most of the bugs were waived just to get the game released. Let's start with the mission map. There are no filters by mission type or aircraft type, but there is a map filter option in the bottom right corner, which does not remember my choices. One of the persistent things in the simulator is that there is no persistence in the settings. The drop-down menu keeps popping up the mission info widgets without prompting, which overlaps the list when trying to scroll, and the map automatically moves to recenter around the mission if I accidentally move the cursor off the scroll bar, which is frustrating if you want to see the missions in only a specific region. Certain mission types, especially charter, don't pop up until you zoom in close enough, but you can see every damn first flight or cargo mission from the moon. If you hover over a mission, though, and try to zoom out to see the destination, the mouse eventually loses focus and drops the selection. Once you do hover over the mission, a few things don't happen. You don't know the distance, and you don't know the type of aircraft eligible for the mission. More on this later. For sightseeing, it's not always obvious which ones are for helicopter and which ones are for airplanes, even though there are icons in the panel, but they work roughly 70% of the time only. Many short hops want to go across the Alps in the winter, which is outright irresponsible in a Cessna 172, but most other planes can't land or take off from the glider fields the missions select. While it's plausible that many people who have money to charter a plane want to go skiing in the Alps in the winter, I'm pretty sure there are other business people rushing to board meetings to the financial centers all over Europe. This mission offers big money if I am willing to fly 6 hours, more like 3.5, and land a PC-12 or a Sky Courier on a 100-meter strip with 1.5 tons of cargo. This little village in the middle of Spain is a hub of international cargo transport between Algeria and France. Charter and cargo missions seem to prefer backwater strips. For a change of scenery, it would be nice to sometimes fly into an actual airport. I flew into Big Bear Lake Airport at least 6 times with my charter plane, usually from the same airstrips. I don't necessarily mind, just saying. I compared available missions with a friend of mine, and we found that more than half of our missions overlap down to the smallest detail. So we tested a small charter flight into the Alps to see what's the difference between doing it with the Vision Jet and the Cessna 172. Exact same mission, same compensation, same conditions, flown at the same time. The Vision Jet did it in about 45 minutes, while the Skyhawk needed almost 90 minutes. And what was the difference? The Vision Jet got a bigger bad weather bonus for some reason. I am also pretty sure the Vision Jet could handle flights longer than 200 miles. The transfer aircraft option is convenient in most cases, but in practice, good luck figuring out if a passenger plane is for sightseeing or for charter. Still, it has some value if you know which planes are nearby and you need to move them to a mission. But it's not really used in practice, since in most cases you transfer the aircraft after you accept the mission. You can also manage your aircraft from here, except if you have more than one plane at one airport. Then it is a coin toss. Even if you click on Manage Plane, it still won't tell you which company it belongs to. In this instance, the aircraft there is not a cargo plane, but then which one? In this case, my pilot is at the same location as one of my aircrafts. Which one? Probably a charter plane. Is it a Vision Jet or a C-172? Who knows? Does it matter where my pilot is at the current moment? Because it doesn't seem to. In some VIP charter missions, the sim wants me to transfer a DHC-2 over to Europe from Alaska and won't let me choose any 172 or Vision Jet nearby. Why? Passenger capacity is not the issue, because in one case it was only a single person traveling. The answer is runway length. If the destination strip is shorter than 400 meters, apparently it's a job for the beaver. However, the natural habitat of the beavers is up north, where these majestic creatures can roam freely in the wilderness. Also notice the loading times and stutter when choosing a mission. I spend a large amount of time jumping in and out of mission descriptions to find if my available planes can handle it, checking runway lengths, constraints and distances since the mission times are usually off by 1 or 2 hours. After browsing a little while, the weight and the lag gets increasingly bothersome. Are we sure that absolutely everything needs to be animated? The world map discovery is also confusing. At first it looks like you can only go where the missions take you, and if you want to expand your area of operations, you have to choose your jobs strategically. This would make sense if there wasn't an option to just click any airport anywhere and just travel there for the price of an airline ticket. Again, does it matter where my pilot avatar is on the map? We'll get back to this later. After accepting a mission, there are a few steps you have to get through before flying. It involves some detective work though, figuring out payload data, runway data, getting rid of the teardrop pattern, and remembering that the EFB weight and balance pages are not only broken, but do not work in this game mode. And don't forget to refuel the plane, that's also very important. You have to jump to a new screen to do that though, and the layout is a bit weird, so sometimes it's easy to miss. If you want to select a different aircraft, you first go to a click-through page with 3 panels to get a list of available aircraft, but not sorted according to distance. The Caeer tree. It's fine. Don't touch it. Thumbs up. As for the specializations, the requirements make sense, although it's way too easy to get the necessary levels. But if you're not lucky, getting enough soft field landings together can be a chore. The selection highlight can be a bit annoying if you scroll through the list. It's either that or dragging the tiny scroll bar at the bottom of the screen. The extra "all certifications have been passed" or "missing certifications to fly this aircraft" text is kinda redundant here since the highlighted panel provides the same information as the normal one. There are a few odd choices made about the available aircraft for the specializations too. Using a Robin for sightseeing seems odd, and in general 2-seaters are not the wisest business choices. The Caravan is included in the cargo, skydive and medevac section, but not in the charter section despite being the obvious choice for short-field destinations in exotic locations. The Porter is not included in the skydive section despite having a variant for it. It's also an iconic bush plane in the short to medium range and a frequent visitor to the jungles of Papua. But if we want to promote the new planes in the sim, the Twin Otter is also famous for short to medium range transport missions, island hoppings, and landings at tiny strips. On the other hand, having the PC-12 included in the VIP charter section is fine, but whatever happened with the TBM? Which, by the way, doesn't try to kill you if you climb above 17,000 feet. I'm not sure why the Airbus family planes are not in the airline section. I understand that each Caeer Mode aircraft has to have a working wear and tear system, but the choices are still odd, and by the time more planes eventually get added, many users will be way past that point in their career to go back to certain mission types or not playing Caeer Mode at all. And now we get into the most confusing aspect of the Caeer Mode, the companies. It is here that the sim gets into a proper identity crisis, and it can't seem to decide if it wants to stay a simulator, become a casual console game, or be a tycoon-like manager too. So it is unfocused and superficial, and there seems to be a distinct lack of familiarity with the Caeer Mode philosophy. It also refuses to commit to one approach. For example, once most freelancer options are unlocked, there's very little reason to return to being an employee. And while we're at it, freelancers are the ones who jump from job to job and between companies, and employees are getting a fixed salary. In this context, employees are in reality freelancers, and freelance jobs are company jobs, subcontracts, or whatever. You are not an employee if you run the company and buy the planes. If the goal is simulation, why bother with running multiple companies and multiple fleets of aircraft? Because if the player is allowed to have 8 companies and dozens of aircraft each, they will have 20 sightseeing Robinsons in Venice alone, a fleet of 200 Skyhawks spread over all major cities in Europe, more beavers in Alaska than there are grizzly bears, and 5 belugas on every continent. It also better support the management of fleets in a convenient way. It should also account for supply and demand, scope, and a wide variety of number crunching. As it stands, especially with the number of broken planes and the ones that are missing from the roster, it's just not worth buying half of them, and it's not worth starting certain companies. Manager mode is about choices. This game mode forces the user to make choices between the lesser of a few evils, because the functionality is either broken or not there at all. Let's go to the overview page. Colorful graphs with scaled number columns are nice to look at and give you a bird's eye view of your company's health, but at some point I need to see hard numbers. I'm running a business after all, and it better get the math right. And here we encounter our next issue. I doubt I make 53 million credits per flight hours. These summary figures tell me nothing useful. But let's go into the account history, where the company filter does not work, the total missions number is incorrect, and the default sorting of the data is anyone's guess. Well, okay, it's expenses, but within that type, it seems to be random. Every column header should be a filter and not just for sorting. If I want to see only one type of expense on one given date, it should support filtering multiple columns at the same time and give me a sum total of that selection. Otherwise, what can I do with this list? If only Microsoft would have a software that could do that. Or at least let the user export it to a file so they can sift through the data manually like our ancestors did back in the analog age. Passive incomes is, well, not displaying correctly for now, but even if it did, the numbers are arbitrary, do not specify which aircraft is making the money, and miss the most important data point, which is the profitability. As I said, if this Caeer Mode wants us to manage airplanes, it should let us do that. And it doesn't get better once we get into the companies. Here's my sightseeing company. The only information I get is that I have 59 airplanes in total in my 4 companies. The number in this header never went above 0 since I started, but it would be nice to know at a glance how many planes I have. It turns out that it's 38, which I don't see on the fleet screen where I would expect it, but I do see it on the overview screen. Period of time does not work, I still have no idea about my profit margin, and I don't know how much money I'm burning, and the passive incomes page is still borked. And God forbid I need to maintain my fleet because they all look the same. The order of appearance on the list is completely random, and once I finish managing one, the selection jumps back to the beginning. Going through the fleet takes an insane amount of time, since it is very easy to lose track of where I was. The fleet overview page is useless. What am I supposed to do here? Even if last known condition was actually working, I don't know which one it is on the maintenance page, so I don't gain any relevant information here. By the way, I doubt that sightseeing is my most frequently used company. According to the density area screen, there is never a good season for sightseeing anywhere in the United States or Europe ever, but spring is good money in Kazakhstan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And in the summer, it's clearly the vast empty spaces of the Siberian tundra and Alaska where the money is at. It's not much better for cargo either. Africa is only busy in the spring. The other 9 months of the year, it's slow business. The US and Europe is still not hot, but the Australian outback is cold in the summer and winter. But at least it looks like I could make a killing with charter flights in Greenland during the winter when the sun doesn't rise for months. The airliner career path is severely hampered by the bugs in the respective airplanes. Many helicopter missions are unflyable as of now, and helicopters are not everybody's cup of tea anyway, so there's not much to comment here. It follows the same logic as the normal aircraft missions, and it offers a wide enough range of activities. The maintenance screen is probably the most well put together feature of the Caeer Mode. It makes sense, its resolution supports the casuals and the hardcore simmers as well. Washing your plane has an effect on your customer satisfaction in passenger-related missions, and dirt will accumulate on the airframe. I doubt my Vision Jet would look like it participated in a mud rally by simply flying from the Mediterranean to the Alps, but hey, it's something. Paint jobs are inconsistent within one company if you use different types of planes. Repaint, however, one would think it means that the user can finally customize their paint job in some way, add a little decal or switch around colors, change font, add the logo, whatever, but no. I can't imagine a scenario where I would voluntarily spend money on something that can be achieved by a bucket of warm water and a sponge. All in all, if mechanics is not your kink, you can do the simplified delegated maintenance option, which would generally be the cheapest on average as well. Going into details can be fun for the more tech-savvy users, but it's still just a clicking game, and the money saved is pennies compared to the time you spend on it. It's relatively easy to reach a point where you don't have to struggle with only fixing your left aileron because you don't have the budget for more. Still, it's a good effort with in-game consequences. And speaking from experience, the alternator and the electronics can die on you in the middle of a 6-hour flight. Buying an aircraft is pretty straightforward, but there are fundamental issues with the functionality. We'll get back to this later. Light and medium cargo missions are mostly separated on the map, not visually though, but they share the same icon. But once I bought a Sky Courier, I found out that suddenly most of my medium cargo missions are only flyable with the 408 or the PC-12, even on routes where the caravan could handle the distance and the payload and can actually take off or land at the endpoint. Since the 408 navigation is broken, my Sky Courier is now rusting away somewhere in the Bahamas because I accidentally transferred it over there from Europe for 700k and it's just too expensive to move elsewhere. I won't be flying that thing until it is patched up. I'm not sure how many people keep in mind the cargo capacities of these aircrafts anyway. I do know, however, that there doesn't seem to be too much difference or variation in payloads and payments. The missions are always around 1000 kilometers, the cargo is always around 900 to 1500 kilos, which can fit into the PC-12 and the 208, but the Sky Courier can fit 3 containers, which can hold more than 1 ton of cargo each. Flying those planes at 30% capacity or less would be a net loss given the price of the plane and the maintenance costs. If anybody ever played a Tycoon-like game, they would know that the most important information about payload is the distance and the weight, not who signed the shipping manifest. It is also painfully obvious that faster delivery would mean more money. Taking a ton of boxes from the middle of the Algerian desert to a dirt strip in the middle of the Spanish desert is a bit weird. But I have yet to get a mission where you collect cargo from a small regional airport and deliver it to a bigger hub or vice versa. As it stands, medium cargo missions generally range between 5 to 6 hours, in reality 2 to 3.5, and that's about all the useful information I get out of them at first glance. It's not that there isn't enough space to include more info before I take a closer look. Choosing missions shouldn't be a puzzle game where I need to figure out if the game lets me do them at all, with little decisions to make. In passenger missions, John Doe and a few of his friends is not a valid data point. The bare minimum is the number of people and if they are adults or children so the pilot can calculate weight. I couldn't care less about their names, that's for the administrators. This is basic stuff. So let's talk about the design philosophy. The effort to make MSFS 2024 appeal to both casuals and hardcore fans, to simmers and gamers, to include study level and casual stuff is a noble goal, but the results are almost always lead to disappointment. Yes, the franchise might get the new gamers, the casuals, but the big spenders will not be impressed. Not to mention, this is where console and PC more often than not conflict with each other in accessibility. It looks very much like the user interface and user experience is catering to the console platform and the game controller rather than a keyboard and a mouse. I have no idea what percent of users are on Xbox and how many are on PC, but I am guessing that the PC users outspend the console users by several orders of magnitude, both in money and in flight time. That's why it's strange that console gets a stronger focus with the interface. But even the console-tuned interface feels a bit clunky. Yes, it's sleek and modern looking, clean and professionally designed, but these are not your dad's consoles. It's not connected to a worn-out 20-inch CRT TV, and it's not 800 by 600 with a 50 Hz refresh rate. Xbox users most probably use 4K TV, which probably takes up half of a living room wall. And yet the fonts are enormous, and the text still sometimes overrun their boxes, and the amount of information on the screen is less than 5 years ago. Even on PC, there is no option to go below 18 points font size. Rest assured, if users can read the instruments in an A320 or the G1000 in a small GA plane, they can process more than 3 boxes of information on a front-end screen. Side-scrolling is another one of those console habits. It made its way onto smart TVs and streaming apps, but it would only make sense to side-scroll if more information can be displayed on one page and the scrolling would be smoother. This is not the case, however. Many of these screens use less than half of the available screen real estate, forcing users to scroll more to get the same amount of information. I'm sure anybody who worked on web shops or online marketplaces, hint hint, could explain the concept. Also, there is nothing wrong with scrolling down. While clutter is a real issue in general, much better balance can be achieved. And again, this is a simulator, not Viva Piñata. The target audience can process more information and has a longer attention span. Arranging information on one page by leading the eye of the user may be hard, but not impossible. It seems to be the trend lately that the user experience design is mobile and touchscreen centric, and with each iteration of an app or software, the number of clicks or taps necessary to achieve the same result keeps growing. I call this the click inflation. One could argue that the reason behind the single function fragmented screens all over the game is that if you have to click through pages one by one, you're more likely to process the information and do the necessary steps. In theory. And yet, it's still easy to miss refueling or maintenance if you just want to jump into the next mission. And anyway, why are there less filters on the aircraft selection screen than in MSFS 2020? Only airplanes? Really? With the amazing selection of aircraft, I have to scroll even more? Why do I have to click 4 times after finishing a mission? Why can't I see more than 3.5 planes on one screen? Why do I have to click 3 times to buy a plane when it can be achieved with less? Isn't it a bit excessive to have 3 panels filling the screen when they could fit into a widget? This double line spacing is just shameless. Given how the Caeer Mode economy works, it's not worth choosing anything but the basic insurance anyway. For example, this is a screen exclusively for fuel only, where for some reason you still have to click extra to add or remove fuel, but you can't handle the payload from here. The other dial is just for display, and by the way, the payload is not always appearing at all. And isn't there an EFB for this? These are competing functionalities, and it's as if the team designing the main UI did not coordinate with the people developing the otherwise handy EFB, which has some weird choices too, but that's for another time. This pre-flight screen layout is all over the place. Experience points have been around since Dungeons & Dragons, and it's an important scaling mechanism that gives goals and rewards and paces out progression. Here, however, it is very easy to breeze past the specialization requirements, and after that, there is no discernible reward for the higher levels, so it loses its function. Since the ATC is randomly not working, the only change at the end is the risk of dropping back from S tier to B tier by missing radio communications when the response is broken, or getting punished for trying to backtrack on a narrow runway with a turning circle of an aircraft carrier. Trying to figure out the difference between airline procedures and aviator performances is also a challenge, with much discussion on the forums about how it's calculated and which one affects the rating and by how. While it makes sense to reward the user with something extra for completing the mission according to some criteria, like weather or not skipping, it's odd that faster travel or delivery is not a factor, and passenger satisfaction has seemingly nothing to do with the plane they are sitting in. It's wild that if a mission says it will pay 400k, you can get more than 1 million in the end, which the world map widget doesn't tell you. This means it's super easy to earn millions with medium cargo and then buy enough pipistrel viruses to darken the skies over New York. And it's the same with the XP. In this mission, the green performance bars give me 70,500 XP, the aviator performance another 21,000, but then the no-skip bonus is 333k and the bad weather adds another 340k for a total of 1 million XP. That means you get 12 times more bonuses than what the mission would give you normally. And then you also get 103,000 credits no-skip bonus and 84,000 bad weather bonus in credits too. Speaking of bad weather, I get a decent bonus even if the conditions are optimal. This removes the sense of achievement and the challenge from the Caeer Mode and also creates a slight ludonarrative dissonance. I know realism is not required for the Caeer Mode, but no company in the real world would pay you 4 times extra above the offered fee for doing an okay to great job. I am sure there is a formula somewhere in the code for this, but the whole thing seems very arbitrary and basically throws so much money and XP at the user that they lose all value. That's not how these mechanics are supposed to work. As it stands, you can expect to level up after each mission, and after a while you are disappointed if you don't jump 2 levels instead of just 1. And if you see a 400k mission fee, you can expect a roughly triple payout. And let's get back to my fleet of sightseeing aircraft and the selection cursor jumping back to the first one. Would it have hurt to add the condition icon to every thumbnail, like needs repair or service done? How about displaying the tail number and the airport that is stationed at? Finding out where any given plane is shouldn't be a data mining exercise, and the only way to get the tail numbers is to actually spawn into the sim in a mission. Same issue here. This screen neatly lists all of my planes except their tail number, location, profits, and flight hours. You know, something relevant. Also, wouldn't it be nice if I could manage them from this screen by selecting them? The headers could use some work too, like shortening and tightening up the available space. For example, what does the 5:56 stand for? Remaining time or 4 minutes before 6 a.m.? Getting a breakdown of every individual aircraft's costs and incomes should be easy since the game does generate the data, it just doesn't like to share it. I have 59 planes, but only 38 generated passive income. Once I spent a tedious half hour to run through the maintenance of all of them, the next day all planes that I didn't fly generated some money. Clearly, some of my planes were in no condition to fly. It would have been nice to know which ones. There is a grounded aircraft section in the header, but it's always 0, and clearly some of my planes didn't fly. Not that it matters, because I still wouldn't know which ones to repair. These check marks are meaningless. They do not tell you if you don't have enough fuel, and the weight limits are often not respected. What exactly is this referring to? And when are these items not checked? I am assuming mission criteria XP refers to the minimum XP I need to have, but I could be 1 XP into level 190, so I probably have enough. Or is this the maximum XP I can gain? Do I really care about the regional manager? The operator is included in the header with a title and an icon. Isn't this redundant? How about including the fueling and weight and balance here and get sliders instead of pie charts? The EFB is a very creative tool to enhance the immersion. So why not use it? And if we are talking about immersion, a mission checklist would solve the issue of the user forgetting to refuel or maintain the aircraft. Once ready to fly, the game could go through the checklist and inform the pilot if they missed something. Here you only have 5 lines visible. Wouldn't it make sense to list by company here anyway and get the breakdown under the respective companies? This is not a statistics page, and I'm not talking about the bugs. 3 data points and they still managed to get it wrong. How about flight time? Most popular region, aircraft, most visited airport, shortest landing, money earned, anything? The game gathers a lot of telemetry data about the user activities that help the developers locate issues and to know what features are popular and what doesn't work. You would think the users would be able to see at least some of that. Not that the overall stats are any better. Number of successful takeoffs? Really? That's the easiest part. I can't trust these numbers anyway because I was learning to fly the helicopters, so half of these are probably bouncing around like a ball in the middle of Budapest. MSFS 2020 had some fun stats like distance flown upside down or below sea level, but these are not really interesting. I definitely have more failed landings than that, and the total flight time is here twice. I admit that these may be trivial issues, but the lack of clarity and the number of access clicks and pages to navigate the menus comes off as a shoddy design. As if they couldn't be bothered to arrange the information in the most convenient way. Sure, loading times are a thing, and fancy animations and sound effects distract the user from the background tasks running, but also putting out the post-flight stats on one screen is not an unorthodox thing. Neither is putting all relevant information and action on the pre-flight screen. Some might argue that modern design and a clean information flow is keeping up with the times, but once again, this is a flight simulator. Endgame stat screens are supposed to be an info dump for the nerds, not hand-holding for the ADHD generation. They have the activities for that. I sure hope the reason is not that the user is too stupid to process 4 sets of numbers after completing an instrument approach in 40-knot crosswinds on a foggy night. Screen real estate is a thing, and one would think the goal is to present information and functions to the user in a convenient, neatly packaged way. Moving on. Right now, by far the most profitable flights are medium cargo missions. There are basically no job offers between the 90k to 250k price range as far as I can tell, and people report that medevac and firefighting missions pay around the same as charter. If there is a distinction between light and medium cargo, but within medium cargo there is still a difference when selecting available aircraft, then there is a category missing. It's definitely not based on weight, because nobody would fire up the Sky Courier for less than half the capacity. One would think that the logic behind differentiating within one mission category is that the cargo is too big to fit into the Caravan, but how would I know? At first I thought bulk and standard cargo made the difference, but it's not that. I can accept the bulk cargo with the Caravan, and besides the PC-12 has about the same capacity. Sometimes it would make sense to send the Caravan for a 300-mile hop if the cargo wouldn't fit a 172, but that's not what happens. Except sometimes in Alaska for some reason. But often you would have to take a Caravan for a distance that normally would be handled by bigger planes. Is it really possible that the fee is based upon runway length? Because this whopping 600k mission would fit a Caravan, which I can't choose, but I'm supposed to take off in 100 meters and land within 300. And I checked. The PC-12 has a takeoff distance of 793 meters and a landing distance of 661 meters. That also includes dodging the tree growing at the end of the runway. If it's true and payment is based on runway length, that is frankly a bit juvenile and irresponsible, especially when you are not allowed to take the aircraft that has a realistic chance of handling it. For a simulator, you have to suspend a lot of disbelief with the color text as well when you take an important shipment from the middle of nowhere to the middle of nowhere. Again, basic things. Sightseeing and first flight are getting obsolete very fast, but I guess they are good for passive income. Passenger missions, don't bother until Sim Update 2, probably. Charter jobs are only worth it for the fun of flying the Vision Jet, but not to earn serious money. It's slightly better if you have a PC-12. And here is a mission for the PC-12 for a 500-kilometer run and 3 passengers that the Vision Jet could handle. This is the same issue as the cargo missions. In both cases, the icons could represent the scope of the mission if your options are limited. It can be a highlight color within the mission type like bronze, silver, gold, or an evolved version of the icon while keeping the color scheme, for example. With the charter missions, the base icon already includes VIP in it, but that's a different specialization and a different set of aircraft are required for it. So how about marking those as well? As for passive income, I started a sightseeing branch in Venice, thinking it's a tourist magnet, so I positioned my 172 at the local international airport. I know it's not realistic to fly sightseeing missions from an international airport, but nobody was complaining. After a week, I noticed that there is a small JA airfield on one of the islands and that most of the sightseeing missions start from there, so I repositioned my aircraft to at least keep up the illusion of realism. I wish I could tell you that it increased my income, but the passive income screen is broken, and since it doesn't differentiate anyway, there is no way to know. Plus, according to the beginning of the day summary, all my sightseeing Cessnas, wherever they are, make exactly the same amount of money down to the penny. I have a suspicion that I could buy 10 Skyhawks, place them in the middle of the desert, and they will still make the same income. A very basic aspect of Caeer Mode is supply and demand. Having to shuffle aircraft around depending on the volume of payload, traffic, closing down branches or upgrading due to increased volume, snatching up contracts with bigger companies would be an engagement factor for the user. The default price could be modified by payload capacity and time delivered or level of service like comfort. Something like this might exist somewhere, but it's very hard to tell if it's there and if it's meaningful. I understand why the creators decided to go for one activity, one company, but in reality it would probably be under one company or at least the passenger part, with the cargo being a different branch. Sightseeing planes could double as VIP charter and vice versa. I admit it's more complicated to work it out, but it's not impossible. Right now it's very hard to operate on a loss, and there are no hard choices to make. The choices you have are very limited and not impactful. If you don't want to cheat with fast travel, the very similar mission distances create a predictable pattern of circles with almost even distances between them, and they conspicuously avoid all major population centers. I often had to fast travel to a big city to unlock it. It might be a convenient option, but I kinda see an odd pattern here. The small frustrations of the world map may not amount to much, but the player spends a lot of time here and these annoyances quickly add up. Mission filters and persistent settings are a must. A mission type filter could help declutter the map, but at least an airplane-helicopter distinction would make sense. This is not rocket science. Why do first flight icons have such a high priority in visibility, and where are the VIP missions? To be fair, if mission filters were available, I bet sightseeing and first flight missions would quickly go the way of the Zeppelin. Too soon? Since you choose your next mission on the world map, where everything is available, there is little reason to go into the company pages except to manage planes. Even that is accessible here, and both versions are clunky. Everything else is handled on the pre-mission screen. An employee-focused career mode could play with unlocking the map gradually based on meeting certain criteria, so the choice of the starting place and the expansion would be meaningful and part of the experience, maybe spiced up with rare and high-value events. Maybe a set of curated airports could help avoid Air Force bases and closed airfields, and curated missions could integrate a feeder-type mission for passengers and cargo. If I run a company, apparently I have headquarters. But where is it? My pilot is in Germany right now and hopped down to Egypt for the price of a plane ticket, but I suffer no consequence if I choose to do a cargo run in Nevada next. I thought the selection of starting place would mean extra perks in the given region, like cheaper maintenance or rent and better deals for local missions, but so far there are no impactful choices to be made. Sure, I could focus on Caribbean island hopping, but there's very little incentive for it other than personal preference, but I don't need career mode for that. If the game decides to go for the fleet building managerial route, then the functionality should support number crunching, supply and demand, and user-friendly asset management. A classic example would be taking over a struggling local charter company or cargo operation and turn their fortunes around, make them profitable. You know, like if a big company buys up smaller ones and then, you know what, scratch that. How about buying contracts for world regions? The mission categories can be based on payload and distance, so it would make sense to fly a bigger plane for a shorter distance or take a smaller plane for a longer trip if the payload is too small for the big ones, so the user has actually a decision to make. The point is that if there are limits to the plane choices in each category, it should be reflected clearly in the categories or icons, so the user is not guessing if a given mission is doable with their fleet or if it's worth doing it at all. Sure, all of this would require a lot of work and thought put into it, a lot of planning and balance testing, but there are methods for that. Sometimes a cardboard map and a handful of tokens is enough to get the basics down before anybody even writes a line of code. Experience points and money earned needs to be scaled and balanced so they feel like a reward and not just at the beginning. Despite being a bit lost with the game mode, it only took me a week to get my companies up and running, and I never struggled with money or unlocking specializations. On the back end, it also involves presenting the options and information to the user in the most convenient way possible. This is not a new concept. There are decades of tycoon-like games that provide a blueprint for this. Now, I understand that there are subscription-based alternatives for career mode like NeoFly, New Sky, Pilot's Life, and so on. Most of them are quite technical and complex and much more number crunchy. I do appreciate that the game offers me an accessible, free alternative to these, where I don't need to hire an accountant to enjoy the flying aspect. It's just not there yet. So let's quickly recap. The game mode itself suffers from a selection of aircraft limited by design and by broken functionality, leaving too few choices on which to use. The missions further limit which planes can be used, even within one category, which only becomes apparent when the user tries to accept the mission. Backwater airstrips become tedious after a while and in some cases unrealistic to even attempt to fly through them. Difficulty is not scaled as far as the broken functionality allows to judge, and relevant information is missing not just because the functions simply don't work, but because they are not even there. The laziest mission design wants you to fly circles around static tornado animations and putting out campfires. The basic design philosophy aspects of a career mode with management options are not utilized, and even though I try to be charitable, this feels lazily put together. Sure, you can goof around flying from A to B, not thinking about money or building a network. This is after all a simulator, not a tycoon game, but then why would you use career mode for it? It is supposed to engage and give goals to the user, but 9 out of 10 times these are chores, not really missions. Apparently, more users are playing with career mode than flying in free flight. Maybe it's because 2020 is more functional for more serious flying. I can't help but wonder how long this half-cooked game mode will keep the user's interest at this rate. I even concede that some of my gripes with the functionality might have completely valid explanations, and I could be wrong about some of them. I just can't shake the feeling that it was rushed and not thought through, and definitely looks like it wasn't balanced. or properly tested. In many ways, the user experience part is a regression from 2020, at least compared to how that sim worked only a couple of months before the new release. Anyway, I'm sure Sim Update 1 will solve a few of these issues, but some will have to wait until Sim Update 2, and even then, many of these may not be bugs, but by design, which is harder to change. That being said, I'm sticking with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 for now, because I'm lazy, because it has a lot of content, and because it's eye-wateringly gorgeous. I wish them all the best, and hopefully they improve the game modes in the near future. I might not have too much patience left for the career mode, but for those who do, they deserve a more polished experience. Oh, by the way, on a completely personal note, if they could make the drone camera work properly, like locking onto other aircraft and a little bit of camera acceleration for smooth transitions, I would really appreciate it for my cinematic videos. Well, it looks like the rain has stopped and it's clearing up. Time to fire up the old lady and get out of here. There is an island off the coast of Costa Rica where I'm supposed to pick up a few crates of eggs or something. See you next time. Alright, magnetos on. Engine to start. Engine 1. We're good to go. V1. Rotate. Son of a